Mr. Djankov. Mr. Djankov, you've heard there quite a lot about the broad vision of the EU and how it aims to partner with member states. Perhaps you could give us a Bulgarian perspective, the national perspective on the outlook for the RRF and how it's going to be implemented and on the ground in Bulgaria. Over to you.
Thank you, and good morning from Washington, D.C. It seems we're all around the world today. Let me give you first three positive features of how Bulgaria is entering this next programming period and the big challenge ahead. So the first feature is that the previous programming period was used quite well by successive governments in Bulgaria to build up basic infrastructure. So if you were, Alice, there characterizing Bulgaria a few years ago, you'd have no doubt started with the fact that physical infrastructure, roads, airports, and so on was very poor. That has changed tremendously over the last 7 years. So by now, well, a lot still needs to be done. Infrastructure, especially road infrastructure, has improved very substantially, and that will help in the next few years in terms of restarting the economy. The second feature, which is based on some latest statistic from Eurostat, is somewhat more interesting with the view of this next programming period and where the money will be going to. Namely, that over the last about 6 to 9 months, just as COVID came to Bulgaria, an estimated 350,000 Bulgarians have returned home, have returned to Bulgaria from the rest of the European Union. To give you an idea, this is equivalent to the second largest city in terms of working age population, which is Plovdiv. So a lot of young people, relatively young people, have come back during the crisis, and at the moment are in Bulgaria looking for opportunities for new jobs, for new businesses. No doubt, if we can provide such opportunities through the use of these significant funds that were just mentioned, this is precisely the labor force, the human capital that Bulgaria needs, but has been bleeding over the last few years. So in other words, the human capital is there, a lot of the basic infrastructure is there. And the third point that I would mention is that in the middle of the programming period, around 2023-2024, Bulgaria is going to join the Eurozone. This has been a long process. I remember as finance minister, the first attempts at this about a decade ago. But now we have a date, an approximate date. We have the path towards the Eurozone, which will help it with investment. So these were the positive news of entering this programming period. The big challenge was already mentioned by the previous speaker. Bulgaria pollutes a lot. So a lot of this money needs to be used to modernize the energy sector, which is, as was mentioned, the dirtiest in all of the European Union. This time of the year, in the winter, air quality in some of the major cities, including the capital Sofia, is below the acceptable limit set by the European Union on many days, which means a lot also needs to be done with municipal infrastructure, so that not just industry is modernized and is turned greener, but also our municipal infrastructure is done so. And there is a lot to be done. These are more difficult investments than the basic infrastructure investment, but they can go a long way to both modernizing Bulgarian industry and not just in the energy sector. Heavy machinery is still a main feature of Bulgarian production, so that has to change too. And as I mentioned, the cities. Often during these days, especially when there is snow or heavy weather, we can read in the Bulgarian news of the pollution that is still taking place in many of our cities. I think that has to be the focus. That has to be the urge and the urgency on the side of our Brussels colleagues to help in the next 7 years that Bulgaria changes and becomes greener. Thank you, Alice, there.
Thank you very much indeed. That's super. Um, Mr. Djankov, first of all, you raised a fascinating feature of Bulgaria's recent history in your presentation, which is this return home of the diaspora. So, a large movement of people back into the country. Um, Now, you present it as an opportunity, which of course it is. You do need this human capital, and these are people with international experience, young people, people potentially with skills that the country is going to need. But we often see in these circumstances where you have you know, a large influx of younger, internationally savvy people, that there's an expectation as well on their part that the country they've come back to functions in a way that they're familiar with and that they're comfortable with. So I have two questions for you. The first is, regardless of any of that, what is the likelihood that that bulge of returning Bulgarians is going to stay in the country when conditions ease elsewhere? So the countries that they've left, often they've left because of lockdowns, because of restrictions. When those restrictions are gone, how many of them are simply going to turn around and go back where they came from? And the second is, how does the government go about ensuring that these people find themselves in a country that they want to support, that they want to be part of? So perhaps you could address those two questions.
Excellent questions, Alice. There indeed, just over the last week or so, there has started a significant debate in Bulgaria over the future of this very significant influx that Bulgaria has not seen in the last 30 years since it opened up after communism. And there are some very early studies that suggest that as of now, when people who have re-entered, let's put it that way, the country and under quarantine, so COVID hurts in many ways, but it helps doing statistical surveys. About 60% of these returnees say that they will look around for jobs, they will consider staying in the country, but if within a year, notice the period, if within a year they cannot find anything reasonable, they will go out. So the majority of people still, in some sense, are careful whether their life will be back in Bulgaria anymore or whether they'll again look for opportunities in the rest of the EU. This is a very tight schedule for the government and indeed our colleagues from the European Commission to deliver, too short perhaps. But 40% as of now say they will stay back. So they have been abroad, as you said, they have gained some valuable experience, perhaps some resources. Brexit also has happened, we should mention that. So a very large share of these returnees actually are coming back from the United Kingdom. So that may be a more permanent stay, or they can look for other countries as well. But so far it's early days, and precisely because of that, going to your second question, it's very important in the next year what the government and the next government, since we have elections in less than 2 months, can deliver. The general comments of the European plans, which is greening of the economy, already discussed, digitalization, are very useful parameters, especially since on the green economy, Bulgaria is far behind, as we mentioned. Digitalization, we actually do well. The question is, where are these many thousands of jobs going to come from? Because a lot of these people are well educated, have good experience, but there are also some people with lesser skills that have come back from the service sectors of European economies, and they will be looking for jobs. Typically, it's the tourism sector that attracts these people. It may be a couple of years before it recovers fully post-COVID, or with vaccines at least. So also the programs that we need to build need to be job intensive. We need to create a lot of jobs. And that's not as clear to me as of yet whether the programs address this issue of job recovery. Thank you, Alice, there.